Hello, I'm Bill McCartney, welcoming you to Townsville for the first event of the National Circuit of Racing for 18-foot skiffs. We're greeted by absolutely ideal conditions, a strong northeasterly breeze and plenty of North Queensland sunshine. And they are set for a start, tightly bunched at the start as well. Prudential down at the bottom end of the screen, coming up to the gun, the start boat out on the right. And it looks like an excellent start there as the gun goes from Prudential. Right in behind them is Prima Drinks. Ella Bachet next on the line. Xerox coming up, looking to have had a very good start. Over behind them is Queensland Events and Bank of New Zealand.
Well, it looks like to me, Bill, that Skill got the best of the start there. Ella Bachet didn't have any pace on, and Xerox starting to come out into clean air as Prudential has clean air. So I think a drag race will start to develop between Xerox and Prudential.
I noticed Ella Bachet immediately had to tack out. Here she goes, having to tack out to the right-hand side. She got caught in bad air, so off she goes. There goes Prima Drink. She's in the same position, and looking as though Queensland Events out on the right here will also start to take gas off Xerox very shortly.
Yes, it's very important that they keep their air clean as soon as the wind goes in the sails, and we can see Queensland tacking away now. Once they get dirty air in their sails, they have to tack away to get into clean air again.
Skilled Engineering doing a nice job so far. At the moment it does appear that Xerox is doing slightly better than Prudential. These are the two pre-event favourites, and at the moment it's neck and neck.
Yes, and we can see the drag race developing there, Bill, and certainly be interesting to see how Xerox and Prudential match up, being the first event of the year.
Plenty of spray coming off the chase boats there as they get up towards the first tack point in this race. Prima Drinks, one of the skiffs early to go out to the right. They were taking gas, and now we see also the Bank of New Zealand, also one of the favourites in this event. They have also chosen to go out to the right. They'll do 2 laps of this course, and we'll see that Prudential and Xerox have gone out to the left, Bank of New Zealand out to the right. They can't sail straight up into the wind. They have to tack up into it. They've separated tacks, and in a few minutes we're going to find out how they've gone. Here's the group that's gone out to the right.
Yes, these boats can sail about 30 degrees into the breeze, and tactics all important on this upwind leg. The guys that get it right and play the wind shifts the best will get around the top mark first. And we can see Ella Bachet coming back across and heading up towards the mark now.
And Ella Bachet crosses Prima Drinks and is well and truly in contention in this race. And back with the racing, the Prudential skiff battling it out with Xerox and being sailed today by Dave Cummins, the Irish international. Usual skipper Rob Brown had an unfortunate accident in the workshop trying to get his machine up to pace. He broke his hand and is unable to compete today, so indeed throughout this regatta it'll be the Irishman Dave Cummins who'll be doing that job.
Prudential sailing a little bit lower but got the speed and tacking now.
Figuring they must be making the ley line, so the Prudential skiff figures they've got to the point where they can get around that top mark. Coming up on their right with right of way, Ella Bachet. We'll see how they cross.
Prudential starting to set themselves up to get around the top mark. You can see all the guys out on those 18-foot wings, keeping that boat dead flat, working the main sheet.
And coming up, still looking to cross tacks with them is Prima Drinks, but Prima Drinks is really at this stage not in contention with the leaders Prudential and Xerox. Xerox has chosen to go a little higher on the track before tacking to go to that top mark, so Prudential has split tacks with Xerox now. Bank of New Zealand coming up on a starboard tack with right of way, and once she and Ella Bachet cross with Prudential, we're going to find out precisely what the order is in this race. The two groups now starting to come together.
We can see Dave Slennett there starting to point towards the mark. The guys will be discussing their final tactics for this upwind beat, which will take them around the top mark and downwind for the first time.
Queensland Events has a camera on board. There's a camera on Dave Clusworth, who sails in the middle of the boat. It's fitted up to a crash helmet that he's wearing, and we're going to be taking you on board with Here We Are Now.
I'm very strapped. Yeah, let's do it.
Dave Clusworth calling for attack, changing directions now.
Good attack.
Skipper Andrew Cuddy complimenting his crew on the action. They have changed directions, the wind now coming across their left-hand side, and I guess they figure they can make that top mark, so action starting to focus now up on the top mark.
Skilled crossing in front of Prima. Prima's still heading up towards the ley line. Prudential there, still in touch with Xerox, but Xerox starting to pull a little bit of a gap, and we see Ella Bachet just down to leeward there.
Right out in the front of the picture, Xerox looked to me as though she's really stormed away here. I must say, Warwick, looked to me like she'd opened up a good 200 gap lead on these guys. Bank of New Zealand doing very nicely. She's crossed in front of Ella Bachet, a great battle between those two. And all skiffs now approaching the top mark for the first time, getting up to around about a quarter of the way through this race.
Yes, when they come around the top mark, they'll be setting their spinnakers, so this is very important. The lead that Xerox has at the moment could be blown with one small mistake. And as the guys sitting crouched together to keep the centre of gravity together, the waves pushing them round a little bit. Phil Barnett down the back there just pushing his boat through the wave pattern.
And now getting up towards the top end of the course for the first time in this race and in this series, and Xerox has zipped away to a substantial lead. It's bad news for the rest of the skiffs out there because the first race is always very telling in terms of who has the pace, and at the moment Xerox is flying.
Forward hand running in, opening the spinnaker bag. Sheet hand running in. He will pull the sheet that pulls the spinnaker to the top of the mast. They'll be working very hard. You can see him in the boat there now. Spinnaker filling. Small claps, a little bit of problems there. This is very strong breeze, a very tough time for these guys.
On board Queensland Events, approaching the top mark. Head cam in action. And they too will going to take the manoeuvre just seen on board Xerox as soon as they get to that top mark.
Good shot there of the boat, just starting to push through the water. They'll be coming up to their final moments of the windward beat, and then they will also set their spinnaker.
Queensland Events currently in fourth position, ahead of them in second position, and rounding the top mark now is Prudential, but a big gap to Xerox. Xerox has opened right up very early in this race and is showing fantastic pace. Bank of New Zealand has closed up on Prudential and has rounded in very close third position. But up ahead, Xerox with spinnaker set, heading now out towards the wing mark and doing very nicely.
Prudential just starting to get their spinnaker up. Bank of New Zealand with a great turn of speed closed the gap right up on Prudential. Prudential's spinnaker just filling there, a little bit of a slow set for them. They'll be just starting to get settled down now. Bank of New Zealand electing to go out to the left first, just starting to hoist their spinnaker now. Elabache fourth, then Xerox having trouble getting around the top mark. The breeze is quite fresh. They're having to flag the spinnaker, in other words, let it go. Trying to get it full. Prudential with full speed. Bank of New Zealand still electing to go out to the left.
And that looks like a pretty good move to me, because if you saw Xerox a second ago, they're having to flog the spinnaker. Prudential chose the same track as Xerox. If they can't make it, they may have to drop it. And look at that, they're still flogging that spinnaker. Bank of New Zealand going out to the left. This could be a changing point in the race. If they can't make that wing mark, then Xerox will be in strife. And there we see it in blue, Bank of New Zealand going further out to the left. In white, Xerox down to the right is having to flog the spinnaker and struggling to get up to that wing mark.
We can see Queensland Events also with their spinnaker up, but I tell you what, with Xerox having to flag their spinnaker like that, these masts aren't all that strong for these sort of battering that it's going to give them right now, and certainly a dangerous and worrying time for Phil Barnett and Xerox.
And also on board this machine, Queensland Events. Those guys struggling to get up to this wing mark. As we can see, Xerox is still having to get that spinnaker flogging to ease the pressure out of it. Prima Drinks in behind them has chosen exactly the same course. Now, you would have thought they would have seen that Xerox was in a bit of trouble, but they too have chosen an early set, and Xerox makes it round the ring mark.
Yeah, certainly for the guys behind, it's a lot easier. Xerox has to come around there, they don't really know the angle, and they've got to sort of test the water for everybody else. Prima there with a nice turn of speed, all three guys out at the end of those 18-foot wings, and the boat absolutely flying on the first downwind leg.
Prima Drinks currently in sixth position. Right behind them, in seventh position, Skilled Engineering, not far off the leaders at all, but at this stage in the first event of the Townsville Challenge, Xerox dominates. We're in sunny Townsville for the first event of the National Circuit of Racing for 18-foot skiffs, and the facilities here for what we're doing are absolutely fabulous. It has in fact been the assistance of the Townsville City Council that has allowed us to bring the event up to this part of the world, and the Mayor of Townsville, Tony Mooney, is very enthusiastic about what this place has to offer in terms of being the gateway to the Barrier Reef.
North Queensland, of course, has been disadvantaged because we've been so far away from the major population centres. Cairns has certainly been the focal point, but Townsville now is developing sort of a lot of tourism packages, resorts, Magnetic Island, the rainforest connection as well, and of course, as you're finding out today, the aquatic side of it with this great sailing condition.
The big move here is by Queensland Events. We saw as the Mayor was talking, there they are, Queensland Events. Up above, Ella Bachet has moved up into 4th position. A great performance by them.
Also, Bank of New Zealand has moved in front of Prudential, so Bank of New Zealand moves into 2nd place and got the hammer down, trying to pull in the deficit that they lost at the start to Xerox.
Getting now down towards the completion of the first lap. We're racing 2 laps today, and Prudential, I think, lost it as they came across to the wing mark. They were having to flag it. Bank of New Zealand chose to go up high before setting their kite as they dropped theirs now, and they've taken some advantage from that move.
Yes, but Bank of New Zealand has dropped their spinnaker very early indeed, and Prudential sailed straight over the top of them. Prudential going for a late drop. Expect to see them drop that spinnaker any moment now. Dave Slater running in now, and here they go.
Up behind them, the big yellow spinnaker of Ella Bachet, but it was Prudential that held their spinnaker the longest. Dave Slennett in the bow of the Prudential, rated the best of the forward hands on the water by many experts, and we can see there that from being behind, they've now got ahead of Bank of New Zealand, but not ahead of those guys in Xerox. Xerox still clear leaders coming up to the end of the first lap. We're on board again with Queensland Events.
Are you ready going, Chloe? Yeah.
Dropping the spinnaker.
Ready? Call me. You ready? You got it.
Warwick, you've been a competitor in these machines for years. That looks like a pretty hard task, getting that spinnaker bag.
Yeah, it sure is. That forward header has worked very hard indeed to get that spinnaker bagged, and we can see that Ella Bachet is trying to sail under Queensland Events, but no way around there. Ella Bachet will have to try and clear their air, but Queensland comes round ahead of her. Ella Bachet tries to get the inside there so not to get dirty air at the windward beat.
These 2 skiffs currently sailing across on the 2-sail reach between the bottom mark and the starting point of this race, a distance of about 200 metres. 1 boat length now between Queensland Events and Ella Bachet. Queensland Events 3rd, Ella Bachet, beg your pardon, Queensland Events 4th, Ella Bachet now 5th. Up ahead, the leaders.
Bank of New Zealand lost a lot of ground there to Prudential. We can see her behind and to leeward, in other words, getting a bit of dirty air probably, and Prudential will be sailing a little bit faster than Bank.
The gap between Prudential and Bank of New Zealand, probably 10 seconds. Coming around now in 6th position is Prima. Up there in 5th position, just ahead of Prima, Ella Bachet, battling it out with Queensland Events, and not looking to me as though they're making too much headway.
No, Queensland Events is sailing very well and got good speed. Skilled Engineering coming around the bottom mark now.
Skilled Engineering in 7th position, behind them the Cruising Rangoon Restaurant. Still within contact, not a big gap between the leaders in this race, other than Xerox, of course. Xerox somewhere on the horizon. We'll catch up with her shortly. Queensland Events, though, doing very, very nicely against Ella Bachet and opening up.
Considering Queensland Events is an older boat, they should be very happy with themselves. And certainly Ella Bachet will have to get their head wrapped around the job to get in front of her.
Back on board, Queensland Events.
Strap. Okay.
Dave Clusworth communicating to his crew and his skipper that he's got the sheet pulled on as hard as he possibly can, and he can do no more. And that was when he was saying we're strapped. That means, I think, Warwick, he can't get the main pulled on any harder.
That's right. That means you can't get the main on any harder. There's no more horsepower there. And if the boat starts to fall into windward, the guys have to run in off the wings.
Skipper of the Bank of New Zealand, Scott Ramsden, doing everything in his power to try and make up ground on Dave Cummins in Prudential. Phil Barnett in Xerox, mate, he's got the horizon ahead of him, he's got the top mark coming up. There he is in white. Now, laying the top mark, they're tacking up into the breeze. The red one signifies Prudential. She's still coming up on a starboard tack, wind coming across her right-hand side, and Xerox clearing away.
Well, Phil Barnett, all he has to do now is settle down, keep his crew just working nicely. There's no panic. They've got the speed. When you see they're just travelling through the water beautifully, the boat bouncing out of those waves. The guy's got the boat absolutely flat.
They make it look as though keeping the boat flat is easy, but there you see big Dave Gibson in the middle, constantly working that main sheet. Non-stop effort, muscle power and skill to keep it flat in the water. And the flatter they keep it, the better the rigs can do their job and drive it along. At the moment, going great guns.
Phil Barnett starting the new Rob Brown Ian Murray design, incorporating all the latest technology available to the America's Cup campaign. And there we see Prudential, the sister ship. But the big difference, Rob Brown has elected to go a lot finer in the rig department, where Phil Barnett, we can see there, in Xerox, has elected to go for a more conservative approach, and it seems to be working.
Well, it's very early days yet. As they approach the top mark, the dot in the screen that Xerox is headed towards there, spectator vessels threatening to get in the road, but here she is now, getting up to the top mark for the final time. She's got a substantial lead. She's 2/3 of the way through the race. Phil Barnett driving Xerox to what looks now to be almost a certain victory.
I don't know about that, Bill. I think it's a little bit early to talk about victory. These are treacherous conditions, and one mistake from Phil Barnett and Dave Cummins or Scott Ramsden could be on his hammer. Certainly, they're going to take a little bit more of a conservative approach. We can see the boys running in there now. Hand over fist, pulling the halyard up, getting that spinnaker to the top of the mast. Forward hand pulling it out to the end of the pole. And they'll have to run out in the end of the wings, hook up on the trapeze, and the boat will accelerate from about 8 to 25 knots in about 3 seconds flat.
Great work from Dave Ewings and Dave Gibson, the young crew with Phil Barnett. Phil Barnett, 15 years down the track in this class, a superlative sailor. Dave Gibson and Dave Ewings on board with him, young men learning their trade and doing it great.
They seem to be sailing it a little bit more comfortably than the first lap, and certainly they got the speed up, the boat's climbing out of the water, probably travelling at about 25 to 30 knots, fast enough to water ski.
The only question mark in my mind about their chances in this first heat of the Townsville Challenge is whether or not they're making the same mistake and perhaps setting the kite too early, and they're going to have to flog it again. That's the only question mark in my mind, Warwick.
Well, we can see the breeze probably shifted a few degrees there up the windward beat, so they probably thought about it a lot more before they went around the top mark. They're under no pressure, so I think they'll probably be all right in that department.
Are they? Are they? Here we go. And as they start flogging, Prudential rounds that top mark for the last time in second position, and maybe there's still half a chance. It all depends on whether or not these guys have got their angle right. They've got that spinnaker set again now, and perhaps they're going to make it okay. Bank of New Zealand coming up to the top mark in third position. Prudential well clear.
Yes, Prudential has kept that lead over Bank of New Zealand. Xerox going for the jibe, through the jibe, jumping on the other wing, slamming the boat down. Beautiful jibe from Phil Barnett and the crew on Xerox.
Yes, a nicely negotiated jibe and a beautifully negotiated trek across from the top mark to the wing mark. They made it just fine. The angle was right. There they are in white. They're going from the wing mark down to the bottom mark and then to the finish. Up behind them in red is Prudential, with Dave Cummins doing everything to try and catch up. And on board Xerox, things just couldn't have started better. Prudential now some 200 metres behind them, perhaps more, and coming down towards the bottom mark for the last time. Xerox stamping their authority all over this race, and it may just be that they're stamping their authority on the total circuit as well.
Well, certainly the boat speed of Xerox has been awesome. They've made no mistakes. They've had that speed up the windward beats, and they've done it all right. The only sign they had of trouble was when they had to flag that spinnaker down the first run. Back on board Queensland Events with headcam.
Sheet hand Dave Clusworth moves into the middle of the skiff to clean up as they head down from the top mark to the wing mark. Almost 2 legs of the course behind Xerox, but still very much in contention with the rest of them.
Whoa, big danger.
Huge nosedive on board Queensland Events. Stuck the beak right down as Xerox rounds the bottom mark. And up on the course, I can see that they survived that nosedive. Usually that'll put them in the drink, but Andrew Cuddy been able to save the skiff from a capsize here. And up ahead, Xerox headed towards the finish line. A fantastic performance from this crew. They have not made a mistake all day. The conditions have been tough. They've done extremely well, and they're going to win this race.
And Phil Barnett seems to have done everything right. The hull speed's good, the rigs are working well, and crossing the line to take heat one, Phil Barnett. And Rob Brown will have to wonder, has he made the right choice in rigs? Certainly the boat speed deficit is significant.
A big gap back to Prudential in second position. Close behind them in third position, Bank of New Zealand. And the final results now of race 1 of the Townsville Challenge.
Well, Bill, Bank of New Zealand just butchered any chance they had of getting second spot. But a nice performance from Ella Bachet and also Queensland Events.
There is just absolutely nothing like showing a bit of early season pace in 18-foot skiff racing. It always influences the rest of the season. Just look at the way Phil Barnett in Xerox went out there today and stamped his authority all over this series. The rest of them are scratching their heads. Tomorrow we'll come back with race 2 to see exactly what they can do about it.